At this point, we begin our second part, which is the section that contains what I call excerpts from the government Bible. I call it that because, as you can tell from part one, there's a small segment of the United States government that makes scientific and technological judgments from a knowledge base that is not available to the general public. If the following information is true, the United States government also makes judgments on a historical, philosophical, and even theological level from a knowledge base that is not available to the general public. These are excerpts from some of that information. As part of my indoctrination into the program at S4, I would randomly be taken into a small room which contained a table, a chair, and 120 or so briefings in blue folders. I'd be left there to read for varying amounts of time, usually about half an hour. These briefings contained a wide spectrum of information, mostly relating to aliens and alien technology. These reports appeared to be an overview of alien information which could be used to brief scientists from any field about the scope of the whole project, and not just their specific field of endeavor. The overview of Project Galileo was accurate. I read the overview and later witnessed evidence which proved it to be accurate. So it is possible that scientists involved with other projects could have seen evidence that these other overviews were also accurate, but I can't make that assertion. To me, these reports were simply words on paper. So to keep from saying allegedly and supposedly in every sentence, I'll relay this information to you as I read it, since I've already put this disclaimer on it. This technology that you've learned about thus far was brought here by some alien beings from the Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2 star system. These stars are located in the constellation of Reticulum, which can only be seen from the southern hemisphere. Zeta Reticuli is a binary star system, which means it has 2 stars, and is located approximately 30 light years from Earth. These beings are from Reticulum 4, which is the 4th planet out from Zeta Reticuli 2. This is the way star systems were referred to in these reports. They simply designate the name of the star and the number of planets from the nearest to the furthest from the star. For instance, our Sun was designated as Sol, and the Earth was referred to as Sol 3 because we're the 3rd planet out from the Sun. A day on Reticulum 4 is 90 Earth hours long. The beings are 3 to 4 feet tall and weigh 25 to 50 pounds. They have grayish skin and large heads with almond-shaped wraparound eyes. They have very slight nose, mouth, and ear positions and are hairless. Any dates in the information regarding these beings were written in a 6-digit number which began with 1623. Since I had no idea what the 6-digit number was for the present year, I had no way of calculating when these beings arrived, or at least arrived this time. These beings said that they had been visiting Earth for a long time and presented photographic evidence which they contended was over 10,000 years old. There was an exchange of hardware and information in central Nevada until 1979, at which time there was a conflict which brought the program to an abrupt halt. The beings left, but were to return at a 1623 date, and I don't know what that date is. With the remaining hardware and information, the U.S. government started the back engineering program. In May of 1987, some scientists took an antimatter reactor to an underground blast facility on the Nevada test site to perform an experiment. Unfortunately for them, their experiment required them to cut the reactor open, which resulted in their deaths. This explosion was explained to others at the test site as a previously unannounced low-yield underground nuke test. I was hired in December of 1988 to replace one of these men. These beings conveyed information about the capability of affecting the human brain to anesthetize the human body. This is done without any physical contact from a remote source. For this anesthesia to be accomplished, the brain has to be in a relaxed state similar to that required for hypnosis. If the brain is subject to any external stimulation like stimulant drugs or loud music, this manipulation of the nervous system is ineffective. These beings said that man was the product of externally corrected evolution. They said that man, as a species, had been genetically altered 65 times. They referred to humans as containers, yet I don't know what we're containers of.
As far as you could tell, they didn't look like they'd been in a crash, right?
Well, there's one.
One.
There's one. And I mentioned this to you a long time ago, and I never added this one thing, which I'll add now. There was one, like I said, that had been shot with a projectile, and I know for a fact it came out of the water. That's all I know.
You know it for a fact because that's what you were told?
Yeah, that it came out of the
water.
water.
Big projectile like a howitzer shell or something right there?
I know, it was about, it's hard to judge from distances, you know, like from here to the exit sign, how big is that? But I'm guessing it was maybe a 9-inch diameter hole.
The sport model, no dents, no scrapes.
No, it looked like it came right out of the showroom.
And it looked like the Billy Meyer beam ship.
Yeah, from the pictures I've seen of the Billy Meyer one, which, you know, it looked fake to me, but no, there it is.
I'm sure the Billy Meyer people are happy about that, but I mean, you know, there's a lot of people don't take that case seriously, and
it's either the most amazing coincidence on the face of the earth, or something really did happen to that guy, Billy Meyer.
Have you ever asked anyone that has any inkling of any idea of where they got him or how they got him?
No, but something must have been said to me from Barry. But it was just too long ago, and I can't quite remember what was said, but it just left a seed in my mind. I think at least one of them was part of an archaeological dig. So it's old. At least one of them is old. I don't know if it was the one I worked on, but I remember something to do with an archaeological dig.
Whoa.
So that means it's not just old, it's ancient.
That'd be a great Steven Spielberg movie.
Yeah.
Right?
As all of it would, yeah.
Yeah, that tripped me out when he said that for the first time.
Yeah, that's a freak out right there. Just a couple of dudes with some brushes looking for a Tyrannosaurus Rex bone and hit metal.
And when did they find it? You know, that they have 9 of them.
Yeah.
Well, and how could we have not heard about that? What about the guys with the brushes? How could you uncover something like that? And
well, Joe's newspaper at home does. I mean, they said it on that first day.
Oh, you mean the Roswell?
Yeah,
Billy record?
when you told me. Yeah.
At any rate, he told me how everything worked. He showed me the equipment where the digital information came in, where it was converted to photographic images. They were doing 35 millimeter strips of film at that time, which were then assembled into 18.5 by 11-inch mosaics, they were called. There was a digital signature and a grayscale on every 35 millimeter strip. And those strips were from successive passes around the moon. And they would take and build up a photograph. They would scan one section of the moon, then another and another, and then they would get a larger image. So this mosaic then would be put in that contact printer, and that was then a print that was issued to whomever, the press, the scientist, whatever, wherever that was intended to go. So he was showing me how all this worked, and we walked over to one side of the lab, and he said, by the way, we've discovered a base on the back side of the moon. And I said, whose? What do you mean, whose? He said, yes, we've discovered a base on the back side of the moon. And at that point, I became frightened, and I was a little terrified, thinking to myself that if anybody walks in the room now, I know we're in jeopardy, we're in trouble, because he shouldn't be giving me this information. I was fascinated by it, but I also knew that he was overstepping a boundary that he shouldn't be stepping over. And then he pulled out one of these mosaics and showed this base, which had geometric shapes. There were towers, there were spherical buildings, there were very tall towers, and things that looked somewhat like radar dishes, but they were large structures. So I didn't say any more to him because I was concerned again that somebody was going to come in at any moment, would catch us having this conversation, and we would be in real trouble. I realized that he was telling me this information because he didn't have anybody else to talk to. Now, probably in that laboratory, he was probably one of the few enlisted people, and he was a worker bee. And he had a high-level security clearance, obviously, but he couldn't share that information with anybody else. And in those days, we didn't. When you had your security clearance, you took it seriously. It isn't like today where people don't take these things seriously. We had a different set of morals and ethics and values. That's the way we were raised, and we stayed bound by those agreements. So it was rare that someone would do something like this, but this fellow and I were the same rank. I think he was very distressed. He had the same pallor and demeanor as the scientists outside the room. They were just as concerned as he was. And he needed to discuss it with somebody. So that was the end of it right there. I didn't take it any further than that. I just filed it away. But the interesting thing, every day that I went home, I would think to myself, I can't wait to hear about this on the news, And, so I'd turn on the TV and I'd look at the news to see if they're going to announce, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon, being really naive, And of course, here it is 30-some years later, and we still haven't heard about it. But at the time, I had been given about 30 of these photographs. They weren't photographs with artifacts in them, but they were photographs from that contact printer. I had some of them autographed by Dr. Colley, who was the head of the project at that time. And when I left San Francisco a few years ago, I actually sold them all in a yard sale because I was tired of carrying them around. And I may have a couple of them filed away someplace, but it was probably one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made. What was really interesting is I'm not sure what the resolution on those photographs were, but I know that we could discern from the satellite photography we were doing at our installation, you could read the license number off a car. at that point in time. So I know we had that level of technology available. Whether or not it was on that lunar orbiter, I don't know. And this also always brings to question, in my mind, why we're getting such low resolution on photographs that we receive from Mars and any of these other missions. The resolution of these photographs is very low when we've had since the early 60s up in my mind.
Well, I think the most convincing case that I've ever even been involved with has never ever been made public, and that was the incident up in Utah some years ago. There was a guy that lived in a remote trailer just outside Dugway Proving Grounds, and he was a photographer. He'd worked as he was in the Army as a photographer, and he retired from the Army, and he went to work for, no, I'm sorry, he didn't retire from the Army. He just got out of the Army, and he went and worked for Dugway Proving Grounds as a photographer. He was never married. He was an orphan. He lived by himself in this single wide, probably 14-foot by 80-foot trailer. He had built some sheds and stuff around it. OSI at Hill Air Force Base called me and said, we got this guy that lives in this remote area up by Dugway that sent us all these photographs of UFOs. He said, and we don't really have anybody up here that's, and this was like 84, latter part of 84 or first part of 85. We don't have anybody up here that can really, talk to this guy intelligently. Could you come up here? Because they didn't have a 9Q. A 9Q is a OSI designation for somebody that investigated these things. So I went up there. I talked to my boss. He said, yeah, go up there, whatever you want to do. I went up there, flew up. We went out and visited this guy. This guy was not a very intelligent person. He had a lot of common sense, but not well educated. He only went to 8th or 9th grade, but there wasn't anything he didn't know about cameras or taking pictures. He learned this all on his own. I mean, the Army taught him, but then for years at Dugway, he took pictures of things out there. He showed us a book of all these photographs and these creatures. And we were saying, where did you get these things from? He said, they land out here. He said, they land out here? I said, well, when did he said, oh, they left a long time ago, but they come here and landed for years. I said, so I asked him to tell me the story. And he tells me that in 68, the latter part of 68, he came home from work. It was a fall day. He goes in, makes his meal, and all of a sudden he hears some noises. He has a cat that ran around crazy. And he goes outside and he sees this craft landing in his backyard. And he went in and got his camera. Of course, being a photographer, went out and took pictures. And creatures came out. He took pictures of the creatures. And he has these pictures there.
What did they look like?
They looked exactly like the Ebens. Mm-hmm. They were Ebens. I mean, they never talked to him, but he said, well, they didn't talk to me with words, but they talked to me in my head. He said, I could understand then that they were having problems understanding me. And he gave him all these gifts that he had. And at first I thought this was a setup. Honest to God, when I got there, I thought this is too real to be it. It can't be real. And I tell the guy, the OSI agent from Hill, I said, is this a setup or something? Or this guy had movie props? Or this isn't real. He said, why are you saying that? I said, because it looks too real to be real. He said, no. He said, I don't know. He said, we've never been out here. So he showed us everything. And the contact lasted from about the 60s, late 60s, until about 75, 76. And then they told him they were leaving. And they gave him these gifts. And they're star-shaped. There's some of them that were like bronze statues and little models of things. And he said, they gave me, these are gifts they gave to me. I said, one of the questions I had was, why are you telling us now? After all these years, 7 years or 8 years, whatever it was, why are you telling us now? He says, I'm dying. This guy was a chain smoker. I bet you he smoked 5 packs of cigarettes a day. In an interview, he probably went through a carton. And he said, I'm dying. He said, I'm not going to live for another six months, but I got to do something with all this stuff. He said, and I figured that you might as well have it. The Air Force might as well have it. So we sent the flag up, and then we got truckloads of people coming down, NSA, CIA, to review all this stuff. We actually they contracted a company to come down with a moving van to move all this stuff, package it in a unique manner, because they don't know if this stuff is setting off a signal. Or I never thought of that until one of the technical people up in Santa Fe, or up the headquarters, said in Washington, said, you know what, these things might be bugged or something, or radioactive. Or so they took it all up to headquarters, and I don't know.
How many objects were there?
Oh gosh, there were probably 24, I don't know exactly, probably at least 2 dozen. Some of them were just objects that they were made of, I don't know what material, but you couldn't really figure out what they were. I mean, obviously meant something to the Ebens, because they gave them, you know, to him, and thinking that it was something meaningful. And so they packaged all that stuff up and took it to headquarters, and I never heard anything about it. And I've never read or seen anything on the internet about this case. Now, I think George Knapp has. I think somebody mentioned it to George Knapp some years ago. Art Bell sent me a letter once, some time ago. Not a letter, I'm sorry, email. And he asked me about the Utah case. And I'm not sure which, I sent him back saying, which Utah case? And he never responded to me, so.
Do you know if this gentleman's name?
His first name was James, and he had a very funny last name. It's like a Polish name, Zadowski or Zadorski or something like that. He was a Polish origin. I knew that, and but he was originally from. He grew up in an orphanage in Northern California, but I guess his mother and father came to the West from they immigrated Poland to the United States, and then they went west to California, and I don't know, somehow they died, and he was 3 or 4 years old, and I don't remember how old he was.
Do you recall what these objects look like? I mean, just a few of them. The ones
some of them were shaped like a heart, a bronze heart with some calligraphy inside of it, and some of them were just statues of, almost like ceramic statues of something, maybe a god or something. You couldn't really explain. They were small. Some of them were this big, and some of them were real big. And there was another one he had was a wreath, almost like a wreath, and there were different symbols around this wreath. And in the back of it, they had these appendages that came out, maybe to put it on a stand or something. I could never figure it out, I'm sure. And I only saw them when one time that he showed them all to us, and then when we came back to package everything up, to send them up. So they're up in CIA or DIA or someplace. Be interesting to. I'm sure they've been analyzed.
As well.
Yeah.
Were the photographs daytime of the craft? Or
oh yeah, all of them were daytime that I can remember, and they were as clear as you can ever. And he took pictures inside the craft. These are pictures inside the craft.
What did those show?
Where they showed instrument panels, showed a screen, a huge screen with maybe the universe or star charts or navigational charts or something like that. And they told him he had this chart, and this is we were leaving the first time when he said, "Oh, I forgot to show you this," and he went into a chest he had, and his house was a horribly maintained house, and he finds this. It's hard to explain it. It's like a laminated paper that has these lines through it. And he unfolded it. And he said, "Oh, this is where they came from." Well, there's no references on it. So you know, where is this? He didn't know. He said, "But this is the chart they gave me." And that's the only thing that we actually took back that day with us. And then we, of course, came back later and get everything. And I don't know what they ever figured out. They don't ever tell us much after that.
It goes up.
Yeah, it goes up and never comes down.
Did you ever hear where, I mean, there's all the UFO lore, which I discount, but where some of these ET species were from, what star systems?
The only one that I know for a fact that I read later was Zeta Reticuli. I don't know. Zeta Reticuli, yeah, Zeta Reticuli.
But there was a species from
Yeah.
And
that was
from
Evans.
An official source.
Yeah, that was from official source. Now, there's a lot of people within our retirement group, a lot of speculation on different star systems and close star systems and things. But officially, that's the only one I know.
When we got to this high point, I was taking video camera, and I had actually turned to the north, which just kind of slopes down. And right there was something that stuck out like a sore thumb, especially with jungle terrain, things like that. Vegetation, very green stuff, was something that stuck out so well. It's always going to be basically imprisoned in my mind for the rest of my life, and it has been for 14 years, was something that was rotating, and it was transitioning between colors like a light matte gray as well as a dark matte black. So in between, that's what it kept, and it was very smooth. We had all looked at each other as we got online, and we decided to investigate. The further thing I want to say is that I actually took pictures and video of this before we actually trucked down. We had a dump pouch where we basically, if we expend ammunition, we want to retain our magazines, so we put those there. So I dropped my camera in there, and we decided to go down. We didn't have any communications, which was weird, and that was a very odd thing, and it's something that either could have been good that we didn't, or it could have been something that could have been very bad. And it just however you want to look at that. Once we got down this slope, we were approximately 150 meters away from this craft. When we all got to the point where we could see it, just like behind here, again, Mr. Schratt, phenomenal job. You can see that the craft here actually had was roughly about 300 feet. And the reason why I know this is because you could fit 3 of the helicopters that we flew in on underneath this craft. It was rotating a clockwise motion. The panels here that you see, the black ones, at least 3 of them, was like a Vanta black, very dark. I have no idea what that was. On the very top, there was like a pyramid structure that you could see the shadowing of it, which would elicit that was a pyramid structure. And it had an audible hum to it, kind of like a guitar amp if you were to unplug that, or like a transformer. It's very audible. If I was to hear that sound again, I could tell you, okay, it's probably this thing or something similar to that. It's very distinct. And the way that it was floating, which was about 10 or 15, 20 feet off the ground, it was kind of a very eerie thing to see because I've never seen anything like that in my life. When we got up to that point, we were then intercepted by a team of soldiers or rogue military force, if you will. The most concerning thing about this is they all had American dialects. They had American gear. They had OTVs, black. They had black camouflage. They had very similar setups to what we have, but more high speed, something what you would see special operation groups these days have. They had no insignias on. They had no ranks. They had nothing that would signify who they were. They had black ball caps. They had M4A4s that were equipped with ACOGs, which was a step up from what we were currently issued, as well as PEC 16 IR illumination devices that you use for night vision and night patrols, things like that. So we were engaged. We had 8 of them put the drop on us. You could audibly hear them blow the safety selectors off. They basically started screaming at us, telling us what we were doing. We were not allowed to be there. Who were we with? What were we doing there? Threatened that they could kill us right then and there. We could get lost in the jungle. They could throw us out of a helicopter if they needed to. It was very nerve-wracking at that point, especially looking to my fellow Marines and seeing the reactions on their faces too. We were all freaking scared, to say none the less. So with that being said, each Marine was then patted down along with myself. We had our weapons taken from us. They were basically cleared in condition 4, which means they had no round chamber, no magazine in. They dumped our magazines out of our mag pouches as well into the deck. And then again, because of Marine Corps order, how things are with that, we were told to keep our military ID in our left breast pocket. So they knew that. They asked for our military identification. We gave it to them, obviously, because they have guns in our face. So provided that to them. They had something that looked like modern day smartphones, but this is 2009, so it's not really as high tech compared to obviously today. So they took some pictures of our military ID, and then they had something that reminded me of a BAT system, which is a biometrics tracking system that we would use. This is for insurgents or anything like that. It would take fingerprints, it would take retina scans, it would take pictures of them and document them. So if there was other militaries that were coming to relieve our post, they would actually have this information too to know who they are dealing with. That's what it reminded me of, and I had trouble scanning the IDs. As this is going on, we're going back between these guys as well as what's going on in the background. At that time, there was 4 of these trucks, which were F-350s. They were up-armored. They were pretty beefy. They had weapon cases that I've seen before because of something that we've actually loaded weapons into. They had 2 of them that were in the back of each truck. They also had these containers that was illustrated right here, which come to find out through recent revelations from yesterday from somebody who came forward to Dr. Greer. I don't know who they are, but what they had told him and what he has told me is that this gentleman knows exactly what these were used for because they had like a cylinder on the front, which is either for oxygen or what I hypothesized was for vacuum sealing, which lead me to suspect that they were smuggling narcotics or drugs. Come to find out it's more disturbing than that. This gentleman has firsthand account with this and says that it was for people. It's very disheartening, especially because that part of the world have already gotten ravaged, and it's something that is very hard to see right now because of what I've witnessed, and it's very disheartening. And this is why I'm up here. So they loaded these onto this platform that you can see right there, and as I got up there, like I said, I was going back and forth. These guys are still searching our stuff. They're still, pointing their weapons at us. And after the last 2 trucks that I saw that actually got into that platform unloaded, they had 4 guys in each truck that would unload everything. However they did it, I can't tell you because, again, I was focused on this as well. And these trucks drove off. As that happened, this platform actually rose up off the ground itself. The top part of the craft actually met it down in the middle like this, and it formed into one solid piece. It floated right above the tree line. As soon as it was able to break that tree line, it actually had on the corners of each of these, which was an octagonal shape craft, by the way, on each corner it emanated a light. It was either red, yellow, green, or blue. Only those 4 colors I can distinctly remember. It didn't make any additional high-pitched sounds when it rose up. Once it got past that tree line, it shot over to the left, basically where the ocean was, at so fast, I would estimate probably 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 miles an hour instantaneous like that. There was no rotor wash, no exhaust that would disturb the trees, vegetation. The coconuts that were on these trees were not even touched. It produced no sonic boom. This thing was so fast. So as that happened, they basically had told us to turn around. As we turned around, kind of a couple things that went through my head at that point was that we're done. They actually started loading our magazines into our back into our vest in a way that would be hard to get them to put them into a weapon and to actually, charge a weapon and actually put it around in a chamber. So they put those in. They actually slung our M16s on our back for us, but when they did it, Marine Corps not really issued the best gear, especially at that time. So the slings back then were, I would say, subpar quality, cut my neck pretty good, and they kind of went in that motion and made sure they were secured so we couldn't really get them as easy. And they escorted us back up this slope. And they told us we were not allowed to look back. Two, that we were not able to talk about this. They were actually, two of the guys were actually talking about either, hey, should we smoke these guys right now? That's what they kept saying. It was kind of feeding more into the fear at that point because, again, I don't know who these guys are. I know they had American gear, they had American sidearms as well. If these guys have actually taken an oath like we have, and then why they're going against people like us and even willing to kill servicemen who just even stumbled onto this, it just blows my mind, and it's very sick. So as we broke atop this hill, we decided to book it. And we ran back to the LZ. There was a gunnery sergeant that was attached to the ship. I don't know this gentleman personally, but I know he's very unhappy with seeing us because we had actually had our weapons slung. We were not combat effective at that point if we needed to be. He asked specifically why we were. We didn't tell him exactly why. We just came up with an excuse. And then we waited for the next CH-53 to approach, and we got on board, flew back to the ship. We turned our weapons in back to the armory. We took our gear off back in our berthing, and we went upstairs to be debriefed by an admiral that I've never seen before, and it was kind of somebody who was out of place. I don't know if he has any kind of relevance to this at all, but if that's the case, if he does, I hope he comes forward with that information. It would be very helpful. So as we're going to go ahead and fast track to a couple days later, which we end up in Subic Bay, which is like the party town in the Philippines. So we had 3 days there of liberty. The first night I come back, because we had to report back to the ship each night, we were not allowed to stay out in town. My rack was on my camera was on my rack, and the memory card that was in it was out, and my battery was out of the camera, missing as well. So all of that was missing. The only thing that was there was the camera. Mind you, I had my locker secured. I had other stuff that was basically piled on top of that camera. So whoever did it knew what the hell happened. So after that, the other thing that was also notable with that was each of the Marines that were with me also had their cell phones taken that they brought, even though they didn't bring them on the mission. All their stuff was missing. The other people in the actual platoon never had their stuff touched. It was only us 6 that were affected. So fast tracking back when we returned back to Okinawa, one day I had got a call from the duty that was in the barracks. Each barracks has like a duty of Marines that are making sure there's still order, things like that. He had been told that I needed to go up to the CP, so he informed me, so I had hightailed it up there. And oddly enough, there was nobody in the building, except for one gentleman who was wearing Air Force dress blues that was missing a name tag, which I understand in Air Force policy or regulations that they were supposed to wear a name tag, and he did not have that. I gave him the proper greeting of the day, gave him the salute. He had pulled me into an office, and he had said, you are not allowed to tell anybody in your chain of command. I don't care if it's a general. I don't care if it's anybody. You are not allowed to talk about what happened. You can go to prison for this, or you could be killed. So he slid over a non-disclosure agreement, and it had 2 things that I can recall to this day as I quickly skimmed through it, because again, I had thought we were going to forget about this whole mess. And one was said TSSCI, and the other said Indonesia. There's only 2 things I can recall out of that. So I was forced to sign that. I signed it, and I had got the hell out of there as quick as I could. Before I did that, I tried to ask him who he was, and he would not tell me who he was. So I hightailed it back, and I have not spoken about it ever since I was able to recently because what the law passed. But that is my account for you guys. This is also an urging for anybody in Washington, D.C. who's a political figure. Please get this under control, because there are people who are either being hurt or killed by this, and it's something that needs to be addressed. Please.
I got one last question.
Yeah.
If you could say anything to the other 5 Marines that were on the ground with you that day, because they might be watching, what would you say to them?
Don't fucking leave me hanging, guys. Don't leave me hanging. We're family. We're fucking brothers. We went through this shit. And I get that you got family. I get that you got kids. I got, moving on. But fuck, man. I mean, you see what I'm trying to do with this. And I'm just trying to get the truth. I hope that they do. And if I can get them to come out and at least understand that, there may be some aspects that are uncomfortable, with what I'm having to deal with. But it's just the reality of things. It's not pretty. But if you got the fucking balls to do it, I don't have kids, me, I still got a lot to lose at the end of the day. And I know they do too. But the fact is, I'm just sick and tired of people bitching about things and not doing anything about it.
Me too.
And it's all a bunch of talk in this fucking world. It's all a bunch of talk. It's all I see on social media. That's why I'm glad I'm off of that. You know what I mean? That's why I'm glad I'm off, because guess what? I don't get to see that anymore. I get to focus on what I'm trying to do. And for me, having people reach out to me that have open minds and are like, you know what, I actually heard about something like this happening in Vietnam. Or they like, I heard about this happening in 2004. And then there's people who are coming out that are participating in these operations unknowingly because they think the constitutionality of it's legal, and it's not. And that's why this is happening, because these people think that at the end of the day, they're doing something that's oversought, and they don't know that degree. It's very compartmentalized, as you know, being a CIA. You know, they only know what they're told, and they only know what they're briefed on, and what they're allowed to have access to. It depends on what they're doing.
That's how they keep it secret.
Yes, they do, and not everybody's going to know that. You know, so I hope that anybody who's in those industries understands that, you know, if there's anything that seems off, you know, don't approach it how the guy that was at the Pentagon that talked about U.S. forces being involved in Ukraine. I'm sure you heard about that because you saw FBI HRT raid his house and took him into custody. And he's probably going to sit in prison for the rest of his life because of revealing classified information on these platforms.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that. And these guys that are with me that are doing this, they're not doing it either. And the thing is because he did it that way means it's illegal because it's classified material to a degree. It may be illegal, but he screwed that up. Now, the way that we approached it was because we contacted the government and said, hey, this is what I know. This is what I was subject to. And they were, of course, because I approached it in the right way, they're going to reward you with the protection, with the law that they passed to make sure that you are well protected, regardless of what happens in an illegal fashion. So these other whistleblowers need to understand that. So they can come forward. They're going to have the same protections. That's why I can paint them a picture and tell them what to expect. I can point them in the direction of who they need to talk to. You know, and just the humanity needs to understand that this false narrative that's going to be portrayed in the media, such as alien invasions and stuff like that, it's been planned since the 50s. There's documentations talking about this. As far as SAIC, or Science Applications International Corporation, talks about the stagecraft. You know, honestly, if you're somebody who's such a high developed species or something like that, it's like walking by ants.
Yeah.
Are you gonna fuck with them? No, you're just like, there's fucking ants. They just walk by. I think like the same thing that they do with us.
Yeah.
Why are they gonna fucking try to fuck with us? But the same thing, we all of a sudden start shooting them down and then reverse engineering their stuff and then trying to weaponize it, and then we're using it against each other for nefarious activities, trying to use the fucking, you know, these advanced projects to do very illegal, very dangerous stuff. It's just, it blows my mind how much this goes down.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just, my goal is just to hopefully get this fucking changed.
Well, I hope it does.
Me too, buddy.
We'll be praying for you.
Thank you.
Cheers.